Welcome to Inside Iowa Politics. I am Gray Television's Iowa Political Director, Dave Price. Maybe we can call it the few, the proud, like that Marines slogan. Perhaps that describes the Iowa caucuses in 2024. Now, Iowa Republicans had about 110,000 people participate this time around. That number was down. Of course, you had a former president in Donald Trump running, and he was essentially running like an incumbent president, and the weather was really bad. So the number was not as high as it has been in the past. For Democrats, of course, completely different scenario. Democratic National Committee had stripped Iowa Democrats of their first in the nation status, something that they had enjoyed since 1972. So they came up with this two-part version of the caucuses. They did the in-person part back in January, but that was really just party business stuff, the platforms, those kind of things. They tried a mail-in version to do presidential preference cards, and they released the results on Super Tuesday. We talked to Iowa Democratic Party Chair Rita Hart about how it all worked out and what she's thinking as she looks ahead to 2028.
What does democracy look like? And to me, it's so important that everybody has the opportunity to participate. And so we'll have those conversations, and we'll also talk about what we learned from this process and how we can improve it. And I think that that's clear. That we're going to be in a different situation in 2028. It will be a much more competitive environment. We'll have more people involved in the process as far as candidates are concerned, which makes a big difference, I think. And so hopefully we'll talk about, should we have a system where we mail out presidential preference card requests to every Democrat in the state so that there's even more accessibility? Should we have drop-off boxes so that it makes it easier for people to participate, especially those who are procrastinators or who don't trust the Postal Service or whatever that may be? So there's going to be definite opportunity here to improve the process even further.
What about the atmosphere in a traditional caucus night that the state has experienced for so long? Even when you have an incumbent president, it still brings a lot of people together, gets people charged up, and then maybe gets them to feed off the energy of those around it. It's a little different when you drop a piece of paper into the mailbox, right? So how do you duplicate that?
So yeah, that's what those in-person caucuses, we've talked a bit about how those need to be reimagined, and I think that that's accurate. We will be able to take a look at how this process went this time, and I think, again, if you look at the participation we had this time, pretty darn good considering it was, 15 below wind chill or whatever that night, and a lot of snow for a lot of folks, so they did have a difficulty getting there. And so we want to make sure that, like you're saying, that we're taking a new look at how we can't get that excitement. And I think that the excitement is different than drama, right? That people want to have an opportunity to chat with their neighbors, to see what everybody else is thinking, to find out what they need to know about a candidate who's running for president, and what their neighbors think about that candidate who's running for president. And so I think there's ways for us to really take a look at that again and see how we can't create that kind of interest, that kind of spirited back and forth and discourse that can take place at those in-person caucuses.
How do you look ahead from now until November? Let's say Joe Biden doesn't come here to campaign much, if at all. You have congressional races to think about. You have legislative races to think about. How do you build that if historically we were more of a purple state? We've really been voting more as a red state. So before you could ever get us to be a blue state, you got to get us purple again, right? So how do you try to pick off some seats here and there if you don't have the national help that you sometimes would?
Yeah, it's up to us. We're not going to have. I tell Democrats across the state that nobody's going to come in and save us, right? We've got to save ourselves, and we do have a lot of work to do. And we have from now till November to get as many people fired up about this election to start this process of turning this state more into a purple state. That's just so important for us. It's so incumbent upon us to do the hard work that it takes to make that happen. And we know how important it is. When I go across the state and talk to Democrats, they're very unhappy with the fact that women's reproductive freedoms are being taken away, that our public dollars, our tax dollars, are going to support the private schools more than they are to the public schools. That's really hard for people to take, and it's really an unpopular issue, and yet our Republican legislators are voting for these things. We just saw, the drama play out with the AEAs, that AEAs are doing a good job, that people appreciate the job that they're doing, and it's an issue that has been brought up by the Republicans, by Governor Reynolds, that doesn't need to be fixed, and yet that's what they're doing. They're passing legislation that's totally changing the way AEAs do business. People don't like that. It's not a popular thing to do, and it's very frustrating for Democrats to see that their representatives are not voting in their interests. And so, again, we've got from now till November to be smart about this, to do the hard work that it takes to make sure that people understand the issues, that they know that their vote really matters, and that more importantly, if they want to see change, they've got to get to work and make that change happen.
Both Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and Senator Joni Ernst publicly expressed their endorsement for Donald Trump now that Nikki Haley has dropped out of the race. Now, we have seen that Senator Ernst is not always a fan of what Donald Trump says and does. For example, she defended Nikki Haley's husband when Trump was ripping on him. I asked Senator Ernst, now that she has publicly endorsed Donald Trump for president, what she wants and expects out of him from now until November.
Well, I appreciate that the former president, Donald Trump, can be very hard hitting. And that's okay, except when it comes in the form of personal attacks, and especially to our service members. What I want to see him do is really go after the Democrats. We have a field of opportunity with the failures in the Joe Biden administration. So I want to see President Donald Trump target Joe Biden and the Democrats and their bad policies. Let's do that. This is a time for us now. Now that the field is cleared, we need to unite and not go after each other, go after the Democrats, because they are the ones that have set the policies that are hurting Iowans, all Americans. They've opened the southern border, all of these things. We should be attacking them on inflation, on the border, on all of these hot spots around the world where we see the world imploding. All of that is Joe Biden's fault. We should be targeting him.
You expressed frustration that the bipartisan immigration agreement, the border security agreement, just kind of stopped as the former president weighed in on that. As you sit here now, should Iowans have any hope that Congress will do anything this year, or will this be up to the current president to do something and then we see what happens in the general election?
Yeah, the current president, Joe Biden, he can use different authorities that are already granted to him and existing laws to do basically what President Donald Trump had been doing at the border to make it more secure. What he would not be able to do, which we had hoped to do in the bipartisan border bill, was to make it much tougher for individuals to seek asylum in the United States. And it also, if we had passed that bill, would have given us greater authority to deport people that arrive at the border without meeting that higher standard of asylum. And again, just get them right back to their country of origin. Unfortunately, a president can't do that. A president can't change the law. We as Congress have to do that. I do think, Dave, that we have lost this opportunity.
And it will not happen this year now?
I do not believe it will happen this year unless some wild miracle occurs. I think that there was so much misinformation that was pushed out about the bill. And unfortunately, it was such a great starting point in order to strengthen border control and deport those that come here and approach our border illegally. We would have had the ability to deport them immediately, not turn them loose into the United States, but deport them immediately. And we have lost that opportunity.
Time now for the final five. Number one, back on board. As we mentioned, Governor Kim Reynolds has publicly endorsed Donald Trump for president. One thing I found unique about this time around is that a couple months back, the governor said that Trump could not win the November general election against Joe Biden, and now she is supporting him. And perhaps it's not surprising in this political culture where it is party first, but we are seeing perhaps in a place like Maryland, where that state's governor, Larry Hogan, who is now running for the US Senate, he is saying that he will not back Trump for president. Reynolds is saying that she will. Number two, also mentioned that Senator Joni Ernst is publicly supporting Donald Trump. It just reminded me of a conversation I had with her for one of my books, Caucus, Chaos, Trump, where she talked about the private conversation she had with Trump when he had talked to her to feel out any potential interest she might have in the 2016 cycle about becoming his vice presidential running mate. She let him know at the time that she was not interested. It does not sound like she would be interested this time around as well. Number three, the Iowa poll that Ann Seltzer does is fascinating for so many ways, but there was a question in there that just came out this past week about what Iowans thought about a convicted felon appearing on the ballot in this state for a person running for president. And of course, that could be the situation with Donald Trump, depending on how these criminal investigations turn out. Nearly 3/4 of the Iowans sampled in this poll said that they do not believe a convicted felon should be on the ballot. Fascinating number, especially when you look at how Republican red this state has voted, and frankly, how well Donald Trump has done on a statewide ballot in this state over the last couple of cycles. So just something to keep in mind to see if that could hurt his chances later on, or if people just move on. Number four, as we know, Governor Reynolds wanted to tie AEA changes and teacher pay into one bill. The legislature doesn't seem like it wants to go that route, and Republicans in the House separated it, put out a bill that would raise starting teacher pay by about 50% over the next 2 years. And it was a lopsided total. 93 people voted for it, just one against it. That shows just how popular that issue is among legislators, but I think more broadly with Iowans as well. Close out with number five, and it's privacy versus protections. Another bill that went through the Iowa House, and it would require kids to have parental permission to get a social media account. We're seeing these conversations play out beyond Iowa's borders as well. It does bring up a fascinating discussion about the issue of personal privacy for younger people versus protecting them from some of the bad stuff that they can be exposed to on social media. That's Inside Iowa Politics this week. Thanks for watching.